All right, good afternoon. Good afternoon. If we want to take a seat, we will get started with our last session of the day. I would like to welcome to the stage Nicole Dotson. She's a special agent for the U.S. Department of Education's in the Office of Inspector General, and Terry Harris, the Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Investigation Services. They will be talking to us today about the potential threats facing institutions of higher education. So we'll welcome them to the stage.
Oh, great, it's already on. Hi, I'm actually Terry. That's Nick. So we had to move the tables back a little bit because we like to walk and I'm not that coordinated. So if I fell off, it would look really bad on Nicole because I blame it on her. Lily, I would. Okay, so today we're going to talk to you about potential threats facing higher institutions. First and foremost, sorry about that. All right, let's get started. So, agenda today, background investigation about what the OIG does, what our mission is. Then we'll talk about institutions and targets, like why they might be targets. We're going to talk about external fraud, internal fraud, as well as pathways to success. Like how can we work as partners, because you are our partners in this, and then how to report it. And then we're going to leave about 15 minutes for questions, okay? I am from the north, so I talk really fast, especially when I get excited, and fraud makes me excited. So if I'm going too fast, please let me know. I'm also a walker, as you can see. I can't stand in one place. So if I get dizzy or you get dizzy, just be like, Terry, can you stand still? And I will try to stand in like a couple of places, okay? All right, so the OIG. So what is the Office of Inspector General? So the OIGs were created as independent entities that sit underneath their federal agencies or departments, and they are charged with a statutory mission to promote efficiency, integrity, and effectiveness for those departments' operations and programs. How they do that? By identifying, detecting, and preventing fraud, waste, and abuse. Oh, I will, sorry. Thank you, Nick. Thank you. We also have a dual reporting requirement. What that means is we report to Congress as well as our agency head. That is to ensure that the OIGs remain independent. So we are part of education, but separate at the same time. So the department can't tell us what to open, what to close. That allows us to have that independence and objectivity. So the Inspector General's Act of 1978. So we have actually 7 components within the OIG. We have our external and enterprise affairs, who does our strategic outlooks. We have our immediate office, which comprises our IG and our Deputy Inspector General. We have legal services as well as management services. Now, the 3 operational components are audit services, who conducts audits activities in relation to Department of Education programs to ensure that those are in accordance and operating with laws, rules, and regulations. Next, we have technology services, who houses our DAS, which is our Data Analytics Division. So Data Analytics, DAS. They are our force multiplier for audits and investigations. They ingest large volumes of data, triage it, analyze it, and provide back to audits and investigations well laid out reports and links to help us move our investigations forward. Next, of course, is investigation services. This is our bread and butter for us. I say that as an investigator, of course. If audit was up here, they'd say it was audit. But again, it's criminal investigators because we do all the work. We make the money go, we make the money come back. That's how we get the money back, it's us. So, investigation services, what we do. Obviously, we conduct criminal investigations. How do we do that, though? Well, criminal investigators in the OIGs have statutory law enforcement authority. What that means is, under the IG Act, this allows us the authority to make arrests, execute search warrants, serve subpoenas, all in and revolving around fraud, waste, and abuse that affects the department programs and operations. Okay? So again, if you're doing bad, we can come get you. This also means that we investigate suspected fraudulent activities done by ED employees, contractors, grant recipients, any individual or entity that awards, disperses, or receives our funds, okay? Or participates in our programs. So that's a really big arm, and that's our jurisdiction when it comes to what we can get involved in. So you might wonder, like, well, how do you guys become full law enforcement people? Like, how do agents become law enforcement? They attend an arduous training academy at Glencoe, Georgia, called the Federal Law Enforcement Academy at FSATC. They go alongside every other three-letter agency that has law enforcement. So we are side by side. We are just like them. We are the law enforcement arm of the department. We are currently situated and arranged or organized by 3 regions. We have our Western region, our Central region, and then we have our Eastern region. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C., of course, but we have offices throughout the country, and we also oversee oversight activities for our U.S. territories as well. All right, so federal student aid by the numbers. So these are these huge numbers, right? So we all know that federal student aid has about over $1 trillion in its portfolio. Now, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners tells you that every year, 5% of that is literally fraud. So if you put that into perspective of how much 5% of $1 trillion is, that's a lot of fraud, a lot of fraud. Understanding that we only capture a fraction, a very small fraction. I think one year we had $92 million come back to us. I think last year it was about $34 million coming back to us. So if that's all we're bringing back based on resources, I would love to have 500 agents out on the streets, understanding that I am overseeing a portfolio of $1 trillion to bring it back in-house. So how do we work with the department? We work with the department very, very well, and all the time, literally all the time. We have identified points of contacts in FSA and all the other department programs and POCs, because it's important for us. FSA is about 50% of our work, higher institutions. So post-secondary education is where we find 50% of our work. But we also work in K through 12 as well. But if you're talking about 50% of our work, then our partner typically is FSA. And in this past year, we have really begun working with them. They've done a phenomenal job doing some things on the front end for prevention, and then think of us as that reactive on the back end, as detecting and then coming out there and enforcing that at that point. The difference between the OIG and then the FSA's oversight and enforcement, again, they do compliance, regulations and things of that nature, whereas we are the enforcement on the law enforcement side. So they have enforcement capabilities as well as compliance, but we come out there and actually do the law enforcement part of it. So they can do administrative actions, we can do the criminal actions. And at times, we can work side by side, hand in hand, along parallel proceedings, where you have criminal, civil, and administrative actions all at the same time. Why do you think institutions are targets for fraud? Before we talk about that, what is fraud? What is fraud? Fraud is simply lying, cheating, or stealing. You lied to me to get something, then you cheated me out of something, and then you just blatantly stole from me. That is fraud in its layman's simplest terms. Now, is it that simple when we investigate? Absolutely not. It is complex, it is convoluted, and it involves a lot of data, a lot of resources to find the fraud. Because once we dig in, there's layers upon layers upon layers. All right, so why are they targets? Money. Money, money, money. It all comes down to money. It's always about the money. People want the money. So if you are handling, dispersing, receiving that money, you're a target. But you're also our front line of defense. Okay? It's important that you understand that your networking and opportunities help us out. Sometimes your infrastructure is not set up to prevent or detect fraud. And Nick will come up and talk about how she's worked with some institutions to help strengthen that and enforce and then strengthen up those internal controls. But if you're not set up to do that, this is where we come in. We can come in, talk to you about fraud indicators, let you know what to look for, and how to build your infrastructure up to help out in that respect. Why are you important? You are my front line of defense. We cannot do our jobs without you. It is important that we educate you on what to look for and understand how to report back to us. Because without that, we're simply, again, reactive. So if you are my front line of defense and understand what you're looking for, that is a role you play for us. And we hope that after today, you will have some knowledge of, one, what to look for, two, how to contact us. So years ago, famous criminologist Donald Cressy talked about why people commit fraud. We have this fraud triangle and three components and three legs: opportunity, motivation, rationalization, right? So we talk about opportunity. Opportunity for fraud. That is your position. Let's say I work in a financial aid office. And so with that, I have access to data, sensitive data. I have the opportunity. Give me the clicker. Apparently, I'm not clicking fast enough for her because I get to talking and I'm not clicking my little things. Thank you, Nicole. So, opportunity. Lack of internal controls is the main indicator for opportunity. Next, we have motivation. These are your financial pressures. What drives someone to commit fraud? They have debt. They have addictions. They're out there, gambling addiction, things of that nature. And of course, greed. Greed. So if you see someone that's driving around, let's say they're on a teacher's salary, and teachers, we know teachers complain, they don't make a lot, and they have like the #1 job in the country is to teach our youngsters. So a teacher's salary may be in a good place, a good number. However, they're driving in like 2 or 3 luxury cars on that one salary. That's a clue. We call that a fraud indicator, especially understanding that they have no other income coming in. If someone's staying late at work at night, when everybody else goes home, if Nicole and I are in their office, 4 o'clock, I clock out, she's still there, telling me that she's got some people coming in to talk to her after hours, or a student is coming in late, that's a clue. Why are you staying and talk to students after hours or extending your hours when no one else is there? Those are all indicators. Little things like that are fraud indicators. Now, just because you have 1 or 2 indicators doesn't make it fraud. It just makes an indicator. Doesn't mean it's indicative of it, but it is cause for pause. Then we have rationalization. This is my favorite one. So why do they do it? They justify why they did it. Well, you owe me money. I worked overtime all week last week, and they didn't pay me. So that you owe me. I feel owed for this, right? It's a toxic work environment. No one's gonna know. I'll pay it back later. I'll pay it back later. They'll never miss it. They'll never miss it. Those are the ones who have access to your petty cash, your checkbooks, your accounts, where they can actually write money out on the institution's behalf. They can justify and rationalize why they're doing it. Now, if you have all 3 of these in place at the same time, that is highly likely that there is fraud going on at that point. Highly likely. Next slide, please. Sources of allegations. How do we get allegations? So our hotline takes in about 7,000 to 8,000 complaints per year. That's just our hotline. But as you see on this list here, we take allegations or complaints, so we call them, from any source. Every one of you is a potential source of information for us. So if you see something doesn't seem right to you, you can call, you can send a message to us. We'll be happy to take that information down. Even if you think it might not rise to the occasion for us, we can have a conversation and talk through it. Because sometimes having those conversations and us prodding for additional information might make it rise to a higher level. Or it may just seem like, hey, yeah, not quite there yet, but we can keep in touch. I am always looking for new friends. Always, always. So if you have anything, by all means call, because sources of allegations come in from everywhere, everywhere. I'm gonna turn it over to Nick. Nick is gonna talk about how we gather evidence for our investigations and how we actually go through our investigative process. Do you want me to click?
No, go sit down. She has to go in the timeout corner now. She's the boss, but I'm going to put her in timeout. Okay, so gathering evidence. As Terry mentioned, you guys are our partners. We cannot do this job without you. So when we start gathering evidence and we're talking about financial aid fraud, it's going to start with you. We are going to come to you. We're going to send you a FERPA letter. We might call you first, and we're going to ask for, the student's complete file, usually. Maybe some of you have received those emails. Sometimes you guys get those emails, and then you call and ask me if I'm legitimate. So that's what happens when we sort of kickstart our investigations, right? And then we get, depending on how the investigation goes, we can gather evidence from lots of places. We have the ability to issue subpoenas through the IG. It's an administrative subpoena. So we don't necessarily need to go to a court to get some information from various companies. We can get federal grand jury subpoenas, search warrants. You'd be surprised how many people will consent to a search of whether it's their belongings, their cell phones. They will let you download their computers. Even when they're committing crimes, they will still let you do that. So we will get access that way. Search warrants can be by electronic means. So, right, we could have a search warrant for email. We can have a search warrant for a telephone, a computer, or obviously a physical location, somebody's home, somebody's office, place of work, whatever the case might be. And then, of course, we do interviews. It's my favorite part. So we charge lots of things in our cases. What is not on here is aggravated identity theft. It's a very common charge that we use. And of course, when we're talking about federal student aid, a lot of times it involves people using someone else's identity to pretend that they're a student, right? We would call them straw or ghost students. And so they're stealing those identities. Also, fun fact, you cannot knowingly let somebody use your identity for a criminal purpose. That is identity theft, even if I say you can have it. So aggravated identity theft carries a mandatory minimum 2-year prison sentence, which is why it's a good charge for us to use to guarantee that somebody's going to have at least some amount of time to sit behind bars. Also, we have a specific statute here, 20 U.S.C. 1097, specific to financial aid fraud. That carries a maximum penalty, $20,000 fines and 5 years in prison. The False Claims Act, this is a civil matter. The False Claims Act is interesting because with a criminal charge, right, you have to have the intent. You have a meaning. You are actively working to defraud the government. Whereas when we talk about civil false claims, you don't have to have a specific intent to defraud the government. But if you are submitting any documentation that is false, doctored, whatever the case is, that forces the government to issue some form of payment, that is a false claim. And in civil matters, it's not like in criminal court, right, where you have beyond a reasonable doubt. It has to be 100%, we know you did this. In a civil case, it's just more than likely. So people who have issues under the Civil False Claims Act, you see the penalties there, they're pretty steep, and that's per each count. So, to pay the actual amount of the actual loss, 3 times the amount of actual damages in addition to fines. It's a lot of money. Different types of fraud committed by students, FAFSA fraud, right, lying and all of that. We know that at the end of the FAFSA, it tells you that any, knowingly making a false statement and all of that. So that would be your FAFSA fraud. Identity theft, as I already mentioned. Falsification of documents, that can happen at lots of levels. That can be internal and external, not just in addition to students, it could be people on the inside who create false documents, and we'll talk about that in a case example. And then distance education schemes, that's generally how we get our financial aid fraud, right? It's people that are enrolling in online courses, sometimes at schools that are far off or nowhere near them, and so that's what we call our distance education schemes. These are types of fraud committed by school officials. There's all kinds of the fraud. We can talk about it till we're blue in the face. Every case will be different. Every case will have a little different thing that somebody did. People like to put their own spin on things, and sometimes we'll see that somebody found something new to do that we never even knew about. So I do want to highlight, though, that IT and manipulation of IT systems, accessing IT systems that you either should not be or that you're using for purposes other than what they're supposed to be used for, right? I can't go and look in somebody's information because my friend wants to know what's happening with someone else. So any of that sort of access, that's also criminal. So case examples. So we're gonna talk about external fraud first. If you see North Carolina, it's me. I did it. So Fayetteville, North Carolina, this was a long-term scheme, well over 5 years. This individual utilized over 80 identities, attempted to obtain $4.7 million. When we say an attempt, that is how much was awarded, not how much was dispersed, so I just want to be clear on that. Excuse me. And for sentencing purposes, how much is awarded matters, not necessarily how much is dispersed, so that's an important fact. So she submitted a bunch of FAFSAs, right, for people, concealed her identity, never said she was the preparer, and this went to multiple community colleges in North Carolina. She completed coursework, communicated with schools as necessary, pretending to be the students. You know, you gotta make sure that they're attending in order to get that first disbursement. So the scheme resulted in more than $3 million in aid being dispersed. Individual pled guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud, sentenced to 5 years in prison, 3 years supervised release. Ordered to pay over $3.6 million. That will follow you for the rest of your life, probably. In Danville, Virginia, all of these are very similar, right, for external people. In Danville, Virginia, a woman used other people's information, submitted it on FAFSAs, used it to enroll people in online schools. You really can't do that if you have to show up for class, right? You actually need a body in that seat. So it's always gonna be online. The straw students didn't participate or they withdrew. A lot of times we see that. They stop attending right after the money is dispersed or they withdraw from their classes at that point. Of course, the student aid that was dispersed in refunds, used it for her own personal gain. And she pled guilty to student aid fraud, unlawful transfer, possession, or use of means of identification, also known as ID theft. She was sentenced to 3 years of probation, $264,000 in restitution. You'll see disparities in sentencing. There's a lot that goes into sentencing. So I know it's probably like, well, wait, this other person got this, she got that. It's gonna differ greatly by where the crime occurs, what your criminal history is, how much money we're talking about, how many identities, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of factors when we talk about sentencing. Jacksonville, North Carolina, this case was a little bit tragic because this individual targeted homeless people or people outside of a homeless shelter. And if you know anything about sort of that population, very transient, right? You get a lot of mental health problems, substance abuse problems. So these are downtrodden individuals. And in order to obtain their personal information, he said he was conducting a census and paid them for their information, and in some cases offered illicit drugs in exchange for their information. Submitted the false FAFSAs with false information, and in this case, also had people go take GED exams because you needed, GED or a high school diploma, transcript, something to make people eligible. So went and had people take these GED exams posing as other people. So the GEDs were fraudulent as well as all the information submitted to the school. This targeted one specific community college in North Carolina. This individual pled guilty to conspiracy to commit student aid fraud, aggravated identity theft, and possession of a firearm in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime. And that goes to my point that he was exchanging illicit narcotics, right, for people's information. That is still drug trafficking. Sentenced to 65 months in prison, 5 years supervised release, ordered to pay $243,000 in restitution. So internal fraud, people get a little uncomfortable because we're talking about people from within the schools, right? So it happens. It's not pleasant, but it does happen. So here we have a former university financial advisor. This individual worked for Maryland University for a couple of years. And then right after that, starting in 2008, for the duration of this crime, was a federal employee himself. This went on for over 15 years, over 60 individuals. This case was particularly egregious. He was paying individuals to complete coursework. So these individuals, and their names at least, they went on to complete whole degrees and have degrees issued to them. In some cases, secondary degrees and so forth. So this was really egregious in this instance, pled guilty to conspiracy to commit student aid fraud and wire fraud and student aid fraud. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, over $5.6 million. A former associate registrar. So this was at Delaware State University. This individual accepted about $70,000 in bribes in order to make students eligible for in-state tuition. Their co-conspirator was providing false documents to support those in-state residency claims. This led to over $3 million in lost tuition to the university. So the person pleaded guilty, one count violating 666, which is theft or bribery concerning any program that gets federal funds. And they were sentenced to 15 months in prison, ordered to pay over $3 million. So if you notice, she only got $70,000 in bribes, but she has to pay over $3 million in restitution because that's the damage to the school. And that's what we're after, is making victims whole. Here's a financial aid director. This was a public community college in Virginia. This was a 6-year scheme. This targeted over $230,000 in federal student aid. And basically they sort of boosted eligibility for individuals who may not have been eligible at all or were not eligible for the amounts that they were given. And that financial aid money was then spent for their personal use, right? And so sentenced to 63 months, that's a little over 5 years, 3 years supervised release, and also ordered to pay the restitution, $230,000. Pathways to success. So how can we sort of achieve success? Wherever there's money, there's gonna be fraud. So the best we can do, right, is try to figure out ways to combat it, to try to make it harder, to try to find ways that we can detect it sooner, all of those things. So there's a number of things that you can do. The easiest thing I will start with, which is working in-house with your IT departments. It is very easy. I'm not an IT person. I say easy because I think it probably is. But you set up something with your IT, right? So that if you're getting multiple addresses for, applicants with the same address for the same semester all starting, that should sort of set off a little alarm to somebody. The same IP addresses, same phone numbers. When their email address, is Terry Harris, but I'm Nicole Dotson, that's also a red flag. So you work with your IT to put some sort of alerts in place that can send automatic alerts to somebody, whether that's in admissions, financial aid, or what have you. That's one of the easiest things you can do. Also, a fraud risk assessment. What I would say is you sit down with all of the people that are involved in your processes, right? From the start, when somebody first does their application, they create a student account, whatever the steps are in your process, from the time they apply for admission all the way through to beginning courses, you sit down people from all of those departments, talk through the whole process, and you will find where the gaps are. Because while you are used to your process and your department is used to it, you're blinded to those areas that are weaknesses. Other individuals are gonna sit around and ask you questions because they don't understand your process. So they're gonna ask you questions that are gonna make you rethink maybe some of the process you have internally. So that's one of the other things that you can do. You can also stay current with the department and with the OIG. We have on our website a notification service you can sign up for. We have Twitter and Facebook. I'm sure the department, FSA, has all of those same things. You can ensure that your staff receives training. We come out, we do these kind of presentations a lot. Some of you may have seen us before. We go to financial aid administrator conferences. We come to schools individually. We talk to whole systems. So we come out often and we speak. We do things virtually. So we are always available to provide some sort of fraud awareness training to you and your staff. And you contact the OIG because it's the right thing to do and also because you should want to, and also your participation agreements say you have to. It's true. It's there, right? It's right here on the screen. I didn't make it up. This is part of what's in the participation agreement, right? You have to comply with the OIG. But it's a moral and ethical obligation. And if we are the stewards of the department's money, of taxpayer funds, if you work in financial aid, you should want to be a good steward. If you don't, that's a different problem. But also, you want to deter others from committing fraud, right? If I just turn a blind eye, if I just watch it happen and I know, well, I'm just creating a situation for more and more fraud to occur, for more people to be involved in it. You want to protect the integrity of the programs and so forth. And also, don't make yourself part of the scheme. Easy way to do that is to report about it, right? If somebody approaches you about something, that already tells you who's committing the fraud. So instead of becoming part of it, you should be reporting it. So how do you report fraud? Well, right here on our hotline. Our website, oig.ed.gov. But there is a link on the main department's website. That is the actual website that will take you directly to the hotline. The hotline is a secure portal. You can upload documents, you can put your information, subjects information. You can upload spreadsheets full of names. If you have a bunch of people that you believe are part of a fraud ring, submit them all. Every student should not be an individual complaint. Please put them all together, and you put a narrative in of why you think these individuals are linked, why you believe it's fraud, and then we will do the rest. Your job is not to confirm that something is fraud. Your job is to report suspected fraud. It is our job to make a determination if it is in fact occurring and then to do something with that. You do not have to prove it. You just have to have a suspicion. And that's what we're asking you to notify us of. You can also contact our regional offices. There's always going to be an agent, somebody that is willing, able, and eager to speak to you. I am always one of those people. This is what you'll see when you get on the hotline website. You can remain anonymous, confidential, all of those things. And while that is great, also remember that we can't follow up. So if you don't submit enough information and you don't want to provide us with your contact information, that complaint might just die on the vine because you think you're submitting enough, but it's oftentimes not. It's very broad, and it doesn't really point us in the direction that we need to go. So it is helpful if we have your information. With that said, I don't want to deter you. Please report, check the box to remain anonymous if that's what will make you comfortable. But just remember, it's a partnership, and you, your staff, everybody should feel empowered to reach out to the OIG if you suspect any kind of fraud. We are not looking for the director, for the dean, for anybody specific. Anybody can report fraud, and that's the most important thing for everyone that works within your schools to know. That's me and Terry. That's how you contact us. First name, period, last name at ed.gov. You should probably contact me. No, I'm kidding. Contact her.
No, Nick was right. Nick was right.
I'm in DC, so in the DC office. If you are in Maryland, DC, Virginia, or North Carolina, that is our area of responsibility. On our website, though, there is information about every regional office and which states they have oversight of. And so if you look on there, you will identify which office you need to contact if you want to contact an office directly. But of course, the hotline is always an option. And we will take your questions if there are any. You use that QR code is my understanding. And you can also use the microphones if you're in this room. Feel free. Yes, sir.
So I feel fortunate that I'm in an institution where we haven't had a lot of suspected fraud issues, but recently we have had some situations, and so have paid more attention to all of this stuff and appreciate everything you're saying. My question really is, from what I'm understanding, at least from the admission standpoint, is we're receiving many applications that are fraudulent. And it sounds like with other institutions, you're talking hundreds, if not thousands of applications. So the real question that I have is, at what point are we supposed to send information to you? I mean, is it every admission application that comes in that is suspect? Or is it only if they've gotten through the process and, you know, especially they've submitted a FAFSA and there's aid involved? I mean, that seems very obvious, that end, you know, that, hey, if they've gotten that far, they've actually frauded the system. Yes, we need to report that. But what are you looking for? Because you seem to say we have an obligation to report anything we suspect is fraud.
So the reality is, right, we are dealing with the department's funds. So at the time of application, that's not a fraud to the government at that point. So no, but at that point, it is your job as a university, college, whatever it is, to do your due diligence, right? If you believe that this application is fraud, you need to be in communication with your financial aid department, make sure those people are in for identity verification, and all of those extra measures to try to confirm somebody's identity, right? You still have to be in compliance with all the FSA rules about when you can disperse and if you can and can't and all of that. I don't know all those rules, but we are looking at the point of disbursements when money is going out. We're looking at rings of people being connected. We don't have the resources, reality, to do individual, every single case, which is why also we do have the hotline. It's not easy to process all of those complaints. It takes time. But we can't actually do anything unless money is dispersed, and that's the reality.
And that's helpful. I mean, the idea is we have done that. We got a fraud squad, you know, at our institution now, and we're working everything and kind of have taken the position, hey, if the student hasn't benefited, no aid has gone to the student or, you know, other thing, there's a lot of wondering, does that rise to the level of needing to report, you know, or, you know, and so what I'm hearing you saying is, you know, if we've stopped it before any benefit to the student or individuals, because it's not a student probably, that's not
Correct.
where our application is. It begins at that point.
Just to reiterate, so as Nick is saying, like, you know, on the disbursement part of it, but on the front end also sometimes, if you're able to stop it at that front end, and you do, and you have, let's say, a large group that you've identified, that you want to give to us, though, because we are in prevention and detecting, and so typically what happens is that's the starting point for a fraud ring. And typically, if they're already starting again at another school, they've already committed that fraud somewhere else. And so we say that wait on the back end, but if you see a large group that starts to expand out like 5, 6, 10, 20 people all of a sudden with common denominators, then yes, please give us a call and have a conversation with us. Because for us, we might already be tracking those individuals on another case somewhere else.
Is there anything on there? Yes, ma'am.
So first I want to thank you. I know you personally have come out to the Tri-State Association's annual conference, and the information you provide is really invaluable, so thank you again. I have an issue that, I mean, whenever I think about it, it just gives me the heebie-jeebies. And what it is that the law is if a student receives funding from any source by virtue of their being a student, it is supposed to be considered against their cost of attendance. Well, if Joe's Bowling Alley down the street is doing a student promotion and giving awards away, I may not know about it. Sometimes even my school is doing things and I don't know about it. And I'm wondering, is there a line that is drawn that I need to not worry about it? Because it is sometimes, you know, you can be thinking it's, you know, a couple $1,000s, but, you know, over the course of years or however long, maybe that rises to fraud.
If you suspect that there's, let's say, a scheme, right, some ongoing attempt, and the goal of that is fraud, that's the other thing you have to keep in mind, right? If an individual is doing something, giving something away, and then it doesn't sort of, that information doesn't get to the right place, and therefore it's not counted in terms of cost of attendance, am I doing that because I'm trying to commit fraud and I'm getting a benefit, or is it just not making the information to the right place? So there's not really a simple answer to that. A lot of times mismanagement, particularly gross mismanagement, is mistaken for fraud. So there's a fine line. If you suspect it and you suspect it is fraud, you send that in to us, we take a look at it. We, as Terry said, we work closely with the department. So when we get things that don't rise to our level, we can still refer it over to FSA or some other appropriate person in the department if it's better situated there. So I hope that helps.
All right, so I have a couple questions in the
Okay.
So I think you've answered some of these already. So I think like 3 or 4 of the questions clarify when you should report suspected fraud applications to the OIG that have gone through, let's say, have a FAFSA on file at the same time, but aid was not dispersed. I think we addressed that question initially. Like if you've seen a group of those come in, you should probably give that to us. As Nick stated before, those can be redirected to FSA and we can have a conversation with them so we can put them on what's called a suspect identity file, which is heightened identification purposes for us. At what point do you notify applicant, aid, or recipient? So if I'm not sure I understand that question. It's like, at what point do we notify you, applicant, aid, or recipient? So notify us, applicant, aid, or recipient. I'm not sure I understand that one.
I'm not totally clear on the question, but it raises a specific point. If we reach out to you, if you suspect fraud, what you don't do is tell the suspected fraudster. You don't tell the student, the straw student. You don't send an email to the email that they gave you. So I'm not clear on the question, but you don't ever do that. And you don't even need to spread it around to everybody in your department or at your school. it's only the people that really need to know because they're providing some sort of assistance, right, to get us information we're asking for or to somehow further the investigation. But nobody needs to be notified, so not clear, but nobody really needs to be notified other than us and that communication between us.
I think they're trying to get at what phase of the life cycle of a student are they supposed to reach out to you guys, whether is it...
So this gentleman here is saying that it's potentially they're asking about what phase of the student.
When they've been awarded aid or when they've actually been dispersed aid, at what point do you guys want to hear about it?
So I think to Terry's point, of course, if aid is dispersed, we definitely always want to know. When you get a group of people, to our point earlier, and they're only at the admissions phase, but you see a bunch of sort of red flags that tie those people together, make it look like a ring of individuals, we want to know about those people. It might be that they just came to your school and that they're only in the admissions process, but they may have already hit some other schools, because what we know is, right, after 2 semesters, they can't keep coming, so they just, school hop. So it's possible that in the admissions phase, so there's not a clear-cut answer, but anytime you have a group of individuals at any phase, whether money has been dispersed or not, you have a group of individuals that you believe to be connected, we always want to know that. So whatever phase that happens, we want to know. We'll take from in the room.
No, yeah.
Okay.
So this is kind of connected to that. What we've found at our school is that a lot of these fraudsters that we suspect is that they do late applications for things and they're spamming multiple universities at the exact same time. So they're applying a bunch of places, they're doing their FAFSA late, and then everybody is starting to get aid prepared at the same time, right? So yeah, we add them to transfer monitoring and all that type of stuff, but we're not going to get a notice until it disperses unless we see something else. We're monitoring trends, et cetera. We're selecting them internally for verification. But if you guys could work with the department to make something that is more live, like real time for that, I think it would actually help other schools. Like if we could do a batch submittal, or if we could, instead of just internally select somebody for verification, push something out to FSA, they would automatically select their FAFSA for verification. That might help prevent that across the board. And then also, I think a lot of schools like mine have purchased software so that we can send somebody out to do NIST Level 2 identity verification. Personally, I think it would be really great if the department collaborated and had some type of software that we could send students off to so that all these individual schools wouldn't need to go in and purchase an external software.
Okay, so I know the department, so this past year, the department really did some proactive initiatives with identification verification. I'm not sure if Aaron is still around today, so I don't want to speak on his behalf. But I will take that back to him. We actually have a meeting next Thursday. I'll definitely take that back to him. That's absolutely.
And I think it's definitely like what they're planning for this next phase is to really try and prevent a lot of those applications with the monitoring the bots and all that type of stuff. But like one of the pieces of guidance was you can go out and do identity verification over a Zoom call. No, I don't trust myself or anybody from my team to be able to do that accurately, just like you wouldn't want an online notary to do it, right? So we then, to be secure from and protect ourselves, we've gone out and purchased something else. So if there was, like if you guys are already using a vendor for those types of things, could it just have that next level, that if you get this flag and you want your FAFSA to be processed, that it could be directed directly through a vendor from that side? Just
Great.
thought.
So as part of our collaboration with the FSA, just so you understand, Terry and these people that are at levels above me, they meet regularly. And so from the investigation standpoint, they're able to sort of communicate with FSA what we're seeing. So all of these things that are issues and potential solutions can be brought to the table. But there's also a very clear distinction between the two of us. So we would not be, sort of advocating for any one thing or implementing anything that is going to be an FSA function, because we need to maintain a level of independence. So there is collaboration, there can be suggestions and things of that nature, but then really what needs to happen or what can happen will be something for FSA to decide. And then potentially also it involves legislation, so.
Okay, let me get a couple of questions in the chat first. Give me 1 second here. If a school submits a student via the hotline as a potential identity theft, how do we differentiate between the suspect and the victim? The hesitancy is like, if I submit someone, are you going to investigate the victim? So again, like when you're submitting your complaint, you say, hey, this person's a suspected victim of identity theft. We have investigations where we know that's happening, and we will do our due diligence to identify who the actual suspect is and not harm the victim. Like we really work with the department to try to get some kind of resolution for the victim on the back end. The next question was, we're hearing that if we flag students for suspected fraud and aid was already dispersed, report the students to OIG, at what point do we return aid back to ed? So if you clearly identify that that was fraud on your part, you should follow all your organization's policies and procedures on Title IV return. If you haven't gotten to that threshold yet, then in the course of the investigation, there will be a point for you to do that. But again, if you've already identified it and you are certain that that's what it is, you should follow your policies and procedures as it requires return to Title IV.
Also, if you've done a return to Title IV in a case that we're working on, and there's a significant loss to the university, the college, because you guys have returned money that really has gone out the door, that's something we can address in restitution. Obviously, we're not coming for a couple $100s, but if it is a significant loss, you want to make sure that you're providing that information when you're providing student files. So if we see some excessive amount, it can be addressed, and the school can be identified as a victim and also receive restitution.
All right, go ahead, and I'll go.
Hi, I work at a community college that's been targeted by fraud rings, and so we've got a lot of PTSD as we're, working on this, and we've become very suspicious. And as we've seen the fraud rings get better at defrauding us, we're at a point now where we've gotten very good at selecting people for identity verification. The issue is we've already had the fake notaries, so we've said we won't accept notarized documents. We won't do online because we've been defrauded that way. So now we're having students come in with what appear to be fake IDs in person. We don't have photos, so we don't know for sure that this is, but they are largely out of state. Again, I'm a community college in Massachusetts. And these are multiple people coming in with Texas driver's licenses, which
Red flag.
is a red flag. But we don't have a way to kind of verify or move forward with that. And I'm wondering if there are resources available at the point where we have a fraudulent document. Is there something that we can do with that to have it verified? Because at this point, we're asking our financial aid counselors to make a determination on something that is well out of their wheelhouse.
So a few things. Now I'm bothered, I can't remember. There are websites that will actually have information about the different markings on these kind of IDs and things like that. But also, I know some schools, some community colleges even have like sheriffs situated in their offices, or they have their own police departments. So those are individuals you can also lean on to help you with determining if an identification card is real or not. There's not really a one size fits all, but obviously a clear red flag. You don't really want to be in a situation where you're like confronting people, right? Creating some sort of hostile type of situation. So I would say you make note of those students, right? You flag them, and if particularly you're seeing in Massachusetts a number of students with Texas IDs, probably a bunch of people that are in concert, so those are the kind of people you would report.
Can I ask a follow-up question on
Sure.
that? Because we do have state police on our campus as our campus police, is there something that would allow us to share that information as suspected fraud with them without?
Okay, so like if I'm coming in, I got like a fraudulent identification card, and you suspect it's fraudulent, you can always make a local police report.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Like your local police forces are there. I mean, they investigate identity theft as well.
Okay.
Because what happens is
Just
if they
concerned.
they make traffic stops sometimes and come across like lots of fake identities, some of our bank mobile cards, and they call us. So by all means, if you feel that's the issue, make that complaint to your local sheriff's office, police department, and then give us a call to say, hey, I reported XYZ to whatever sheriff's department. How many identifications? And you're in Massachusetts. We used to have an office out there in Boston, and so we've not been out there in a while. So Nick will make note that Eastern Region needs to get out to Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, Nick. All right, so we're hearing that several colleges in our region are identifying hundreds of fraudulent admissions applications as well as fraudulent transcripts. When institutions have reported that information, they're saying that the OIG brushes them off and says no funds have been defrauded. Would it make sense that that information to feed back to OIG or ED so that you could try to stop them from completing the FAFSAs as well?
So a couple of things. I don't know how I'm assuming that's going through the hotline. So the hotline can take over 60 days to process a complaint. There's limited number of people and thousands of complaints, as Terry said. But if we do not have funds that are dispersed, it is true that the OIG will not investigate. However, we send lists regularly to the department, and we will say these people need to be submitted for heightened identity verification. So we are notifying the department. We are not doing nothing. When we have that, if we don't have something that we can investigate, we will still report it to the department. So you guys don't need to do that. If you report it to us, it will get to the department side.
We have several students that have been determined as fraud by submitting a police report and confirming their identity. Once determined, the registrar backs off enrollment and we refund all the money. Since this is done, is there anything that OIG can do? I'm not quite sure what the question is here.
That becomes really an issue of identity theft. If there's no damage at that point, it's really an issue of identity theft, and that can be addressed with local PD or people putting the locks on their credit report and those sorts of things, but there's really not much for us to do at that point.
Take that question, I'll go back to the...
Down here. Sorry, I'm pointing at everybody. Pointing is rude. My mom told me that.
I apologize. My question really is about the actual victims, you know, the people whose identities have been stolen. My staff is a very empathetic group, and they want to figure out what to do for that person, because obviously if it was us, we would want to know that someone has our identity and is trying to commit financial aid fraud. Any advice or guidance for us on what to do with that? Because we have gotten pretty good at stopping fraudsters. I think we have a pretty good idea about, who they are, and we've had a number of groups of students, and we do report those to OIG, and I'm so glad to hear that you provide that to FSA, because that was a big question for my staff, because it does sometimes feel if we cut them off at the pass, there's nothing really happening to them. But is there something we can or should do related to the person whose identity we suspect has been stolen?
So this is sort of a two-part answer. If you're talking about a one-off, those individuals should put a complaint into the hotline. They're going to need a complaint number in order to resolve that issue with the department. If they do not have a complaint number from us, the department will send them to us. So you should tell them, if they're individual students, to make that claim on our hotline. If you are talking about a large group of students, or they come from a group of students, you've been in touch with the OIG, potentially we're working on this issue, unfortunately, the wheels of justice turn slowly. So it takes time. And it's unfortunate, but we do remedy those individuals on the back end. We cannot really do a lot while we're in the process of an investigation. So it's also hard for us to tell you where we are in an investigation. So when somebody calls you, the best thing I could say is, we've notified the appropriate people, that sort of thing. But when it's somebody who is part of our investigations, we are having that corrected on the back end through NSLDS, through the actual loans, all of those things. So their record will be corrected. Unfortunately, they have to wait.
Thank you. Give me 1 second here. I know you guys are waiting. There's so many questions. Do we know if FAFSA will start using ID.me or some other tool? I do not know that. What sort of information is considered shared information? Common IP addresses, email addresses,
Telephone numbers,
actual addresses,
P.O. boxes, notary names, actual physical addresses. If you notice that a bunch of people are submitting all of a sudden SAP appeals, and everyone had somebody die, and it's all of this kind of stuff, and that's an increased number, that's sort of a red flag. So any kind of shared information, really. IP addresses, if it's a VPN, that can be hard, but there's a lot of commonalities. So you'll usually see phone numbers repeated, email addresses, and those sorts of things.
So I know we have about 7 minutes. So if we don't get to your question in the chat today, we'll respond via email to you. I'll take a picture. Are you hiring? Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Yes, we are. I just wanted to get that one out.
Let me just say, I need some help in DC, so I don't know if anyone's looking to be an agent in DC, but that'd be great.
All right, so you can go with them and all.
Okay, we're going to take these last two, and then we're going to wrap up.
Hi, my name is Rosa. I work for a community college in Pennsylvania. My scenario is that our bursars department goes through a lot of students. They went through like 1,000 students checking for fraud, and whatever scenarios they used, they picked the students that they thought were fraudulent and held their refunds, right? And now there's this back and forth with financial aid as far as us returning the refund portion of it, and I don't know if this is a Department of Education thing. And they've actually done it in previous years, so this has been hanging out. So I recently just cleaned it up because I'm like, I don't know what to do. Do we give it to them because we suspect it? Do we send it back? Do we send it back everything that was
When you say send it back, you're talking about
disbursement?
Title IV?
Yes.
So I'm going to defer to FSA and the FSA rules on that, and then also whatever internal procedures you have. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on financial aid, but whatever the actual rules are, you want to stay in compliance with that. That's going to be paramount. So stay in compliance with that. If there's reason to suspect fraud where you think, like, should we issue this money, should we not, then additional steps to verify identity and things like that. If you've done your due diligence, then, you know, if the rules say you have to disperse, that's what you have to do. But I would say follow internal procedures, reach out to your FSA contact if it's a really gray area and you're unsure what to do.
Okay. Because our finance person doesn't feel comfortable releasing that funds that she thinks is suspicious.
If you, sorry.
No, go ahead. We don't know.
If they are in verification, if something is holding it up, then you have no reason to hold it. And they cannot unilaterally choose not to disperse Title
Even though
IV.
they think it's fraud, they're thinking
Report it
it.
to our office.
That's what I tell them, and they
But you're going through a process, like they've said. If you believe it to be fraud, you're likely going to put them through some type of verification that would hold up the aid. But if you get to a point where you have verified them and you have nothing else, they cannot choose to not disperse the refund.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And last question.
Hello, I'll keep this quick. We recently reported a fraud ring that we caught through our admissions process, and some of the people had gotten through to FSA funds. And I don't know if there's a process of letting those people know once we report it to OIG, because one of the individuals who never attended our university, but attended our university and got refunds, happened to work for a sheriff's office in our state. And so their local sheriff's office contacted me to get more information because they're trying to open an investigation on the identity theft. And I told him, I said, I'm sorry, let me check with OIG. I don't know what information I can give you. So I know that they weren't looking just to get the NSLDS issue resolved. They were looking to open a broader case on the ID theft. Can we give them info?
So we have local PDs reach out to us often because they get individual identity theft reports. So usually those officers can reach out to whatever OIG office is responsible for their area, and we can assist potentially if it's something that we're not working and it's a legitimate identity theft claim. We can provide a level of assistance from a law enforcement perspective. There's a certain amount of information we can share. So I would direct them to whichever office, I'm not sure where you're located, but whichever office covers your area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much. We just want to thank everyone for coming out today. We hope you've learned a lot and had some good time with colleagues and you've got a chance to network. I think a lot of people have stressed it, but as you all hopefully learned quite a bit, we have also learned. We've heard you. We've heard a lot of the suggestions. If you remember me yesterday, I was taking, or a couple days ago, the days run together at this point, but I was taking lots of notes. Immediately, we were out with like the dev team trying to figure out if some of those suggestions could actually be implemented pretty quickly. So you all gave us great feedback. We're excited to take it back and try to make it better. The last thing is I just want to thank you all for what you do. I've been on the school side. I remember the late nights verifying, the tough SAP appeals, the sitting in a conference room feeling like you're the only person to reason because everyone wants to do all this stuff that's not legal, and trying to explain that to them. So I know how hard it is, and I know that in the last year, FSA has had a lot of change, and you all have been very patient, and you've worked with us, and we just want to thank you for that, and thank you for what you do, and know that we're here to help you. So if you have questions, throw them our way. If you have suggestions, we want to hear them. So thank you. Safe travels back. We will see you hopefully in December. So thank you.